Hello, bună ziua, buongiorno, buenos dias, bonjour, and welcome to the Human Protocol of Avexa podcast. I'm Theodora Savlovschi-Wicks. I'm the founder of Avexa Partners and your host. The idea behind Avexa is pretty simple. We're here to shine a light on the individuals inside the drug development industry. Because whilst we absolutely embrace AI and automation, the tools that free us from the monotonous, the repetitive, the less glamorous corners of work, our focus stays firmly on human interaction. The emotions, the trust, the joy of a new role, the shift that happens inside a team when the right person walks through the door. The Human Protocol sits at the heart of all that. Each episode, we explore the human, either as a professional navigating a career inside drug development, or as the patient at the very center of the protocol we're all here to serve. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's lovely to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Shall we start off with just a short introduction, just so our listeners know who you are and how we got chatting, really?
So I started my career back in 2012 in clinical research, and I was actually a student placement for a company. I worked for Johnson & Johnson on their medical device industry, and I kind of grew through the ranks within that company. I didn't know anything about clinical research. I actually wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I studied psychology at university, and somebody had told me that a lot of psychology applications lack clinical research experience. So I thought, right, I'll take a year out and I'll go and do some research, and then fell in love with the industry. So I kind of took on different roles, started as like a student placement, and then I took on a CTA role, and then went straight into project management, and kind of grew within the project management ranks within Johnson & Johnson. And then I left to join a very small CRO and made that big jump from kind of big corporate structure to being the first employee of a CRO. So very different, still project managing, still running clinical trials, which is what I love to do. And then that's kind of led me to where I am today. So I now have a role as the director of clinical research for a company called MediLife, that we offer clinical research services to medical device companies that are wanting to come and sell their devices in the UK, and we can, provide the evidence basis to be able to sell them devices. And I'm soon to launch with my co-founder Anna a platform called Revolution CRP. So that stands for Clinical Research Professionals. So that's really all about trying to make an impact in the clinical research industry in general.
So Revolution CRP, what sparked the creation of that? Where did it begin? Where did you see the need, and what need does it kind of plug into?
But Revolution CRP is a platform based around community resource sharing, career growth, and well-being. And the reason it came about was it was actually based on a conversation, and I was going through a really busy period in my job, and Anna had said to me, "Oh, make sure you look after yourself." And I was reflecting on that conversation over the weekend and thinking, but when you're in the middle of this, you don't know how to do that. I've burnt out before, and it took me quite a while to recover from that. At the same time, so I was kind of reflecting on that burnout recovery period and what that really required from me to try and get some insights into how I could avoid it again. And at the same time, I was doing some career coaching for people in the clinical research industry. And I just kept hearing the same things over and over again around kind of overwhelm and lack of career growth and lack of pay transparency. And everybody that I spoke to, I was basically having the same conversation. So it was just a period of reflection. And I was thinking about the challenges that I've been facing with staff turnover. And I do think we have a challenge in the industry in general with staff turnover. And so after discussing with Anna, which was just a conversation, we were kind of saying, I think it comes down to a few things. It comes down to the lack of support, especially in a remote environment. So whether that's community and peers or line management, people move on from roles because they feel overwhelmed, burnt out. They want an opportunity to set new boundaries. All their, wanting career progression, and their setup doesn't allow for that. So, and truthfully, I think part of it's pay transparency as well. People want more than so they move. So that sparks the idea to create a platform that really provided resources and education to be able to empower people to overcome some of these challenges themselves, because I think, self-responsibility is a really big piece of this. It's not all the environment that you put into as well. So that's kind of where we started, and it's evolved over the past year, really.
That's really interesting. Now, obviously, when we speak about burnout, we speak a lot about the CRA position in itself being very much, burnout conducive. But would you say, is clinical research as a whole and the industry in this moment in time that is in fact burnout conducive? So, that burnout and that overwhelm is not perhaps just limited to a single type of role, but, throughout the life cycle, I guess, of the career?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's natural when you think about the position that we're put in. So there's multiple different motivations for doing clinical research, whether that be for a regulatory approval, whether somebody wants to sell a product, whether it's to get innovation to patients. You're not always part of the discussion about what the motivation for the research is, but then you're putting this little pressure to be able to deliver that on time. If you're working for a CRO within budget, often with these staff turnover challenges and with every staff team member that leaves, you lose a little bit of knowledge, and then you have certain roles within it that can be, if you don't manage them well, conducive to burnout. So, like, a lot of travel that's involved, the difficult conversations and the working with the people that happen. We've got multiple conflicting priorities and multiple projects. So I actually think it's a natural kind of outcome of the job that we do in clinical research, and then also the culture that's built.
Would you say there's more burnout and there's more pressure in a vendor or a CRO versus a sponsor? Or would you say, it's pretty much the same sort of pressures on both sides, just slightly different?
I think I see it from all angles. I've seen it in every place that I've worked and people that I spoke to across different setups. I will say again, it comes down to that kind of motivation for doing the research themselves. When you're working for a sponsor, that's obviously to get that to the patient, the product to the patient as quickly as possible. When you're working for a CRO, a lot of the times that's monetary driven, and so that does bring a different level of pressure, I would say. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other, or one leads to less burnout than the other.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's quite often I speak to a lot of people coming from the CRO side of things, wanting to go to the sponsor, thinking, it's going to be a little bit more relaxed. It's going to be a little bit better. There's less pressures. But actually, as you say, there's definitely pressures on both sides, and there's pros and cons on both sides, right? Especially depending the size of company, or depending on the mission of the company, or the culture of the company, and actually your line manager as well, and the environment and study that you're on. Right. So obviously you've been working on Revolution CRP for about 10 months now. So is it launched? Is it launching?
We're in the final stages of testing, so I can't put a date on it. But I think we're a few weeks away. We're a matter of weeks away from launch rather than months now.
Brilliant. That's really exciting. So walk us through, the platform. So what's free? Is there a paid version of it? What's included?
So we started with kind of 4 main areas of the platform. So we've got a community area that's really designed to be able to be that space, especially for newer people coming into the industry or people that are working in a remote environment, to ask the questions that they maybe don't feel comfortable asking other people, and utilize other people's experience to be able to answer that. So that's all anonymized, so you don't have to be worried about your manager seeing that you've asked a stupid question. It's all anonymized, and that's where we'll have like webinars about certain topics. And then we have an area, it is split up into 3 pillars. There's an area for kind of research resources, which is really sharing tools and templates and how-to guides for things that we've been through within the industry. And then an area for wellbeing and an area for career growth. So that's really taken all of our learnings, or some of the topics that we've heard that people want to talk about, You're putting them kind of into an article form for people to read through in their own time. So we've got like 50 pieces of content that will be ready at launch. And that's everything from like startup trackers to how to do an ethics submission, to also managing overwhelm, prioritizing, nutrition. There's all sorts through to how to develop skills and how to manage people for the first time. There's all sorts of topics in there that we've put under them 3 kind of umbrellas. And then we also have an area that we've built that's really about tracking your own stress data. So again, coming back to that self-responsibility of being able to pick up on your own trends. So these are questions that you can complete on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, however you want. And once you've put enough data in there, you will get some trend graphs that kind of show you how you're projecting on your own stress levels, which, is an indicator to how you're performing in, relative to burnout. And then we also have an area that's around rating your role. So again, with this kind of transparency piece of telling people what they've experienced within a particular company, within a particular role. It also includes like pay scales, so you can put in there what you got paid for that role. Really, to be able to just provide transparency and give some power back to the people rather than the employers. And then soon after launch, we've got a recruitment piece coming in, and that was really based on feedback from people in the community. They were constantly asking if that could help them find jobs. So our intention is that we will build out an area of that will help people as well.
Yeah. Well, there's an awful lot that's gone into this, right? I'm particularly interested in understanding, and seeing how it works in practice, when you kind of build your career trajectory, I guess, and you look at, where you are, where you want to be, and kind of getting a little bit of support with understanding what else you need to do or what are the next steps and so on. That's super interesting. I bet you're going to have lots of interest in that side of things. I guess, as a recruiter, I speak to so many people who constantly ask me, what's my next step? Or they have an idea of what the next step looks like, but they don't actually know how to get there. So I think that'll be extremely interesting.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. You also asked me about what was paid versus free.
Yes.
So I think it's important to answer that question. So we, our mission really is to be able to revolutionize the culture in clinical research. So we always want to have a free area of this. But we have to be honest, we also have put a lot of time and effort into creating this, and the maintenance of it also requires quite a lot. So we are keeping it as low cost as possible. There's subscription model so that there's kind of like a paid monthly option. And so there will be free areas, and then basically the way that we've made that decision is the things that require more maintenance, then that's because part of the premium version of the platform. So you can always see, what's included in the free area, what's included in the premium. You can upgrade for a month and then cancel. There's, we tried to make it as flexible so that we reach as many people as possible, while still maintaining the fact that there's some costs involved with having something like this.
Of course. And it sounds like it's obviously, you've been working on it for free for the last 10 months, as well as your full-time job and other responsibilities. And of course, you have to see some sort of financial payback or benefit when this does go live. There's an awful lot of resource and expertise that has gone into it. I'm really excited to see it live. So what's your long-term vision with it? Do you envisage it being more as a community or, a resource library, a wellbeing tool, a career development platform, all of it in different parts? Or is it kind of, let's launch it, see what does best?
Yeah. And I guess it's all of it really. But we're also really want to take on board what people want from the platform. So, this is only a starting point. And when it comes to, the paid version of this, it really is so that we can continue to invest in bringing people what they want. Because our ultimate vision, and this might seem very big picture and very far-fetched, it might take us 50 years to get there. But this is a place where everyone in clinical research will go to. So, everyone from working in the big corporate companies to the small CROs, or they're just starting out their career, or they've been a director for 10 years. And it becomes a place where everyone can find what they need. So whether that's that they're just starting out and they want to see a template, that they want to ask questions, or that it's that they want to provide, something to give back to the community and being the people that answer their questions, Burnout doesn't happen straight away. There's different stages of it. People can pick up the resources or the information that they need to try and avoid that happening. And I really think that if everybody that played a piece in the puzzle of clinical research took responsibility for their piece of that, then we could have a completely different culture within what we do, because ultimately we've got an incredible talent pool of people are passionate about helping people and doing it the right way, and we're not looking after the people that are doing research. So that's the aim. Whether that takes us 5 years, 50, that's where we want to get to.
Absolutely. And I guess from my experience speaking to people, most burnt out are the ones who care the most.
Yeah.
And I guess, they quite often deprioritize their own well-being over the well-being of the study, the patients, the company, the team, the project, and so on. And I speak to so many people who say, just this project, I'll finish this project and then, and I guess, that in itself is probably, probably the biggest definition of burnout, right? I'll just go 110% in for the duration of this project, and then I'll get another project and another project. And I'll never prioritize my own needs.
Exactly. I think that's what we see. Because the industry is also so fast paced, so there isn't that time when they take it. And I think that comes back to people, they move. They move to be able to reset them boundaries. But if you don't know how to do that, then you're going to face the same issues everywhere you go.
Absolutely. And I think quite often when you're the new kid on the block, right, and you've just started at a new position, you're actually more inclined to kind of go above and beyond to prove yourself, to earn your stripes. And then you go straight into, creating those expectations and, not perhaps putting enough boundaries in place at the very beginning, because obviously you don't want to be that person who says no from the very first couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, but I also think I have something quite controversial to say about that, because when I reflect on my career path, I don't think I would be where I am without putting in them hours and going above and beyond at the beginning. And as a hiring manager, there are certain roles where that's what you need. Well, not necessarily need, but that's attractive to you, that you've got someone that's enthusiastic and wants to learn and wants to put in the time that it takes to do that. And so I think there's a balance between taking care of yourself whilst you also do that, and everything in seasons, and then also gaining the experience so that you're more able to put a boundary in place, say no to things because it's not aligned with where your goals. But I think I think sometimes we pendulum the other way and we say, oh well, we all want to work 9 to 5 and do our job and get paid well for that. But the reality is that a lot of the experience comes from them conversations that come outside of your 9 to 5.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is actually an excellent point. And perhaps sometimes what comes up often in conversation is a bit of a generational divide in, how we view work ethic, and, how we all have different sort of understandings of what work ethic is, of where the job ends, and you begin as as an individual. But as you say, there are times, especially throughout your first couple of years of your career, where those extra times are important and those extra hours are important, right? So you can absorb as much as you can, and you can learn where to go next, and you can see where you're better at and what you're not as great at, right? But I guess, quite often, as we have 5 generations in the workspace right now, and there's definitely some miscommunication between generation when it comes to expectations of work and boundaries.
Yeah. And I also think that you have to think about what you're trying to get from this. So I don't think it would be realistic to say that if you're going to come to work, do your job and then leave, but whether that's in a remote environment, in an office, and you're not going to ask the questions and you're not going to interact with people, and you're not going to learn more outside of your job, that you're going to fly through the career pathway really quickly. If you're at a season in your life where you're very happy to come in, do your job well, not necessarily be focused on career growth, then that's okay, but that's what you're going to get. I don't think the expectations, in my opinion, and maybe this is a miscommunication between the generations, I don't think the expectations that you can fast track through a career pathway just by doing your job well and not asking anything beyond what you're doing. It's not necessarily about giving more hours or going above and beyond and burning yourself out, but it's being able to generate that knowledge somehow.
Have the curiosity and want to learn outside of the 9 to 5 piece, right?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. I think, we could have a whole episode just on that alone, to be honest.
And that's
but I
my
think
personal opinion. Other people will probably disagree, but that's my experience and my opinion.
everybody tends to have slightly different views on this, right? And as I say, in my experience, it's, different generations have different points of view on how this works. I guess we'll see, in 10, 20 years time, where we are with, obviously, with the integration of AI as well. And we are all supposed to be a lot more efficient, as well. I guess that was going to be, also one of the questions I had for Revolution CRP. Is there an AI element built into it?
There isn't, and it's something that we're in constant discussion about. And I think the reason that it's not there right now is because we really wanted to utilize the people aspect of research. Now, I use AI in my role a lot more than Anna does, for example. I think we just really wanted to focus on the human element of our personal experiences and things that we've seen in the industry without having AI generated responses to things. Now, that being said, when we look forward to the future, already within the 10 months of building this, we've looked at all of the templates that we've put together that help you do your research, for example, and we've gone, if we would have had an AI tool, we probably wouldn't have spent as much time on that. Maybe the plan for the future is to have an AI tool that can do that. Everyone's generating them ourselves, right? So we're not sure yet, but currently there's no AI tool.
Fair enough. Okay. And obviously you both have full-time jobs as well. So how have you kind of split responsibilities as co-founders while still working full-time and, being normal people outside of 9 to 5?
Yeah. And I think, again, it comes back to the seasons I was talking about. We've been in this season of building. So, my social life has been the things that's taken a back step whilst we go through this period. But I think it's really putting into practice everything that we try to educate people on. So boundaries has been a big thing for me. Perfectionism, trying to let go of some of the perfectionism tendencies that the two of us have and the overthinking tendencies that the two of us have.
How's that going for you? Any advice?
There's an article in the platform.
Oh, great.
But yeah, I think it's been really interesting to go through this journey because we are doing it outside of our 9 to 5 jobs and we don't have 9 to 5 jobs either. So it's been communication. Really, we're so fortunate that we have such a good relationship. But kind of communicating on where we're at, if there's something that we haven't got to. And ultimately, we're both project managers by nature. So I think having that skill set has been really useful to get us to where we have got to so quickly. But it's been a really interesting journey to see how some of these things that we are educating people about have been brought up for ourselves in this new dynamic and in this new endeavour that none of us have ever done this. We've never done anything like this before. So that has been really interesting to see, and the amount of times that we tell each other to go back to our own writing has been really interesting.
Take your own advice.
Yeah. So no one's perfect, right? We can say all of this. We can say this is what we've seen. This is how we experience these things. But ultimately, I think consistency and reminding yourself is part of the puzzle as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So talking about your career, so obviously, you've had a pretty interesting career up to, your current position as a director of clinical research. Can you think of a decision or a step that you've taken that was perhaps, a little bit risky but really paid off?
I think it was
apart from, building something alongside your full-time job.
Hopefully that pays off. But I think the biggest risk that I probably took in my career was going from a big corporate company where I established myself to being the first employee of a small CRO. That was a huge change. And the motivation behind it really was because I felt like I had a position at Johnson & Johnson, which was amazing, and I loved, and I had incredible people around me. I was so many people came to that team and that was like their end goal. That's what they were trying to get to. And I was, still in my 20s at the time. I worked very hard to get to that role. But, it was luck that started there and progressed my whole career there. So to go into a completely different environment that I guess was considered less stable, working for small companies with quite a big financial risk, a loss of benefits, and things that you don't really think about until later on down your career path. That was a huge risk for me, but I think the reason I would say that it paid off is because I learned so much about the industry and I learned so much about myself. I think I became the person that I am now because of that move.
Yeah, I guess, when we look at stability in the current environment, is there stability anymore in this current job market? Probably not. I think, if you're going to move, whether you go for a large sponsor, a large CRO, large medtech, or a small startup, your risks are probably fairly similar in this current climate, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the difference is you're more aware of the risk when you're at a smaller company. You're more aware of what's going on behind the scenes. So the pressure can come down to you more transparently than what it can in the bigger companies where if your job's at risk, you'll find out that. So it depends how if you want to live in a world and work in a world where you're not aware of that until something happens, then that's a bigger company. But if you're working, if you're okay with knowing the financial situation of a company or the meaning of a particular project, on your job stability, that can be motivating or that can be a really difficult thing to work.
Yeah. And I guess, quite often I speak to a lot of candidates who think, progression means waiting for that step up or waiting for that next job title or waiting for that promotion. And I guess, there's so many other levers that people can pull, right? Whether that's moving to a small CRO, whether that's taking a chance on a startup or changing therapy area specialization, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think we often think about the career path as linear and definitely get to a point where it really is about experience, be able to get to the next level, and that you're not able to often get that within the same role. So there are sideways steps and backwards steps. So I would agree. I think different therapeutic areas, different companies, different teams, even if you're moving in the same teams, that that can bring huge experience, see how other people.
Yeah. So I guess, when it comes to community, and of course, one of the Revolution CRP gaps you're trying to kind of close is creating that sense of community within the clinical research space. Would you say, peer support or the community has played a part in your own career development or, professional journey?
Yeah, for sure. So if I think back to when I started my career, I was physically in an office. And so I was listening to conversations that were happening. I would turn to the person next to me and ask a question. And I think that really helped me build my own experience because I might not have faced a particular challenge on a project, but I knew something that I had and I had followed that path and I knew how it was dealt with. I followed up with them and said, oh, what happened in that meeting or what happened with that situation? And so I think that really helped me develop my skill set much quicker than if I was working in isolation. But then I also think that our community in clinical research is so small and it doesn't feel like it's something, but only after years of being in it. So, the people that were maybe project managers with me in my old role might now be the director of a medtech, me for CRO support, or the old directors might now want to do some freelance project management work and come and work for me, or might be looking for a new role at some point, and so you see somebody in your network, they know of somebody who's got something else. So I think the career progression, having the relationships with people in the industry is really important, but also to gain experience really. If you think of it, your experience can be multiplied by what other people are going through versus the specific project that you're working on. Exciting. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. Would you say, the obviously the rise of home working and, there's less and less opportunities to kind of, learn through osmosis from your peers and your colleagues in an office space? Do you think that obviously has a knock-on effect on people's career confidence or, opportunity to be visible as well?
Yeah, I think that's my fear, if I'm honest, Theo, for the new people coming through.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason that we've built this community element of Revolution, because I do think there's an impact. Now, I work remotely full time, and I'm a big advocate of remote work and the work-life balance that you can get because of that. So I think, again, there's different seats in your career, right? But I do
Yeah.
see it. My fear is that there will be an impact, and the progression pathway for people that have started their career remote versus in an office may look very differently in 10 years' time, because my concern is that they're not going to be able to utilize that experience that people who started them did. I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's my concern.
Yeah, and I think it's probably, a bit of a collective fear. Again, it's one of those conversations I have fairly often. And I'd say, similar to you, I learned through osmosis. I learned so much from listening to people, from hearing other conversations, from seeing people's reactions, which obviously you don't have access to by being on your own, in a home office. Um, so yeah, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that right now. Hopefully, we'll have one soon.
I do think team environment and consciously the leaders of our industry thinking about how to create that team environment in a remote setting is really important, because it can happen. And I've worked in roles where we do have an incredible team environment, and fresher faces in the industry are able to learn, but then communication channels have to be open and honest and transparent. And I think it takes more effort to, as a line manager, build a relationship with somebody that's on the other side of the country. And so it's being conscious of that to be able to, one, make sure the projects are running as well as they can, and the work's getting done as well as they can without being a micromanager. And also with helping them people that might need it and don't feel comfortable. I think there needs to be a conscious effort in making people feel comfortable to be able to reach out in a different way that we would have done when we were in an office.
Yeah. There's a lot to think of there, right? And to kind of balance. It's a great balancing act. So obviously, your day job at MediLife is within the med tech space, and Revolution CRP is about people and culture across the whole industry. How do those two parts of you kind of feed into each other?
I really think it all comes back to relationships. So, the work that I do at MediLife is still very hands-on within the projects. And obviously there's business development aspect of things as well. And the way that I operate, and then by default MediLife operates, is really relationship focused. So whether that's relationships with our sponsors, whether it's relationships with sites, whether it's team dynamics, I really focus on maximizing our relationships. And I think that comes through in Revolution. And I guess going back to what I was saying earlier about how small the industry is, I think, for my personal endeavors, which are currently MediLife and Revolution CRP, they do kind of feed into each other, or I can see a pathway that they will feed into each other in the future. But ultimately, it's all about building them relationships. I think clinical research built on that.
Yeah, I think that's why we started talking. Got very, very similar views, I guess, on the way we do business and build relationships. So how do you manage, your full-time role and Revolution CRP? Do you have boundaries in place? Do you have, set times when you work on, the Revolution project?
Yeah, and it changes depending on what season you're in each of the companies. So I think I got to a point where boundaries became really important to be able to look after my own physical health, and manage the day-to-day work and the startup of this. And so at one point I had very clear cut-off times for things. And And that was how I managed. And then there's other periods throughout this past year where things have been more fluid. And I really believe in kind of work-life integration versus balance. Like for me personally, if I've got to take the dog to the vet, or, you know, I want to go and have a massage and take care of myself in the middle of the day, or go for a swim, I now do that because I'm in a role that allows me to do that. And then the rest of the work will get picked up based on priorities. So yeah, it's been a balance. And at different seasons, it's looked differently, whether that's firm boundaries or more of an integration of it all, really.
Or more blurred boundaries.
Yeah. Because there's different demands on different things at different times. So I think to kind of say, I'm finishing on my day job and going on to Revolution at 5 p.m. just probably isn't realistic at certain points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got to allow for that blurring of the lines, right, in a realistic fashion, I guess, while still protecting your own time and sanity.
Yeah, and I would say we also, you know, me and Anna work together as a team, and so when there's periods that are busy for one in the day job, the other person picks that up, and vice versa. So I think I've got a really good setup there with Anna as well.
It definitely sounds like it. So, I guess, you know, just for our listeners, where can they follow you, and where can they follow, you know, the Revolution CRP journey? What's coming up?
Sure. So I would say LinkedIn. We probably need to be a bit more open on my personal LinkedIn about what's going on. So that's something I will work on. But yeah, LinkedIn is where Revolution has got a place set up. That's probably where you'll find the most up-to-date information. And then obviously the platform's free. So you can join the platform, and that's going to give you the most up-to-date information, I guess, with it being a free platform to start off with.
Wonderful. So revolutioncrp.com?
Yes, sorry, that is correct.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a real delight speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been delightful.